Hey guys, what is up? Welcome back to another episode here on Gladiator Disc Golf. Thank you so much for all the feedback that you guys have given me on my how to throw a forehand shot video. Today, just like I promised in that video, we're looking at the finer points of the forehand. If you're brand new to the channel, I want to welcome you and thank you so much for coming and stopping by. Please make sure that you like and subscribe so you can be notified the next time a video comes out. Alright you guys, let's go ahead and let's talk about the finer details of the forehand. Down in the description below, you'll see the timestamps for each of them, so if you're looking for a specific skill, go ahead and click on that time and it'll jump you forward into the video to that point. Alright, so the first finer detail that I want to talk to you guys is about getting the snap. Okay, I recently was conversating back and forth with someone on YouTube in the comments section about not using their arm and trying to avoid having a T-Rex arm is what they said that a pro disc golfer called it, and I completely agree. Like I said in my first video, the last thing you want is to be throwing like this and having this shortened T-Rex arm. And so, but you don't want to be all the way out here either, because that puts a lot of strain on your shoulder and bicep, and you're not going to generate as much spin, power, and torque on the disc as if you just snap with your wrist. One of the ways that I have found to know whether or not I've thrown the forehand correctly is if I hear a snap when it comes out of my hand, okay? If you're not hearing that snap, you really haven't used as much wrist as you think you're using. You've really kind of just armed the disc. And another way that you can realize if you're not getting enough snap on the disc is if you kind of see a wobble coming out of your hand. A clean forehand uses a lot of wrist snap and comes in and keeping your elbow tight, not glued to your body, okay? Your elbow's not gonna be glued to your body, but it's gonna be pretty close in, and getting that snap through. So leading with that elbow and then having that snap come out and really keeping that chest and shoulders square and just allowing your wrist to do the work. Hearing that snap is key, guys. You want to hear the snap of the disc because that will help you know if you've really been executing the forehand correctly. The second thing that I want to talk to you guys about is how to control the angles on a forehand throw, okay? Now, a quick review for backhand, when you want to change your angle and you have your disc in the power pocket, if you want to throw flat, you stand straight. If you want to throw hyzer, you bend over the disc and the disc stays square to your chest. If you want to throw anhyzer, you sort of lean back a little bit and the disc is on that angle. With forehand, you have a little bit more flexibility with what's comfortable for you and what you can be most consistent with. Some people like to keep everything in their body the same except the angle of their wrist. Okay, so if you want to throw anhyzer, you just tilt your wrist up a little bit. If you want to throw hyzer, you tilt the wrist down and you release on hyzer. Some people, you might feel that that's a lot going on with your wrist. You have to snap with your wrist and then you have to control the angle with your wrist. So you may not want to do that. You may want to sort of use your elbow to lever the disc. You want to throw with a hyzer, so you come down here. You want to throw anhyzer, so you come up here and you do all the bending in your elbow. That is my personal preference, to sort of change angle with my elbow, because my wrist will then just continue to do the same movement, all right, but my elbow is just changing it. So I prefer to change it using my elbow and keep my wrist only doing one thing every single time. Now the next thing I want to talk to you guys about has nothing to do actually with your body. The third thing is disc choice. So we've talked about hearing the snap with your wrist and controlling the angle with your arm. But the next thing is to know which disc to use. And it's really simple because it's just like backhand. Start off with understable discs, especially when you're venturing from going from mids to fairways and then fairways to distance drivers. You want to limit how much strain you put on your elbow, your wrist, and your shoulder, because what you're going to find when you try to use more overstable discs is that you're really going to try torquing on it because you realize how much power it needs. For example, I have 3 discs here. I have a Star Eagle, Pro Thunderbird, and a Glow Champion Nate Sexton Firebird. All 3 of these discs are, stable to overstable, and this one being very overstable, fairway drivers. However, I need to throw all of them with different power and with different angles, okay? With the Eagle, I have to consider that it's going to turn a little bit, so I'll release it on a little bit more hyzer so that it'll kind of drift to the left and then fade to the right. Remember, this is forehand, so it's backwards of right hand, backhand. With my Thunderbird, especially the Pro one, this one's really gotten beat in, so it flies very straight. All right, if I'm throwing this, I'm throwing on pretty decent hyzer, because if I'm gonna forehand it, it's gonna flip up to flat, it's gonna drift, and maybe come back just a little bit, all right? But for these 2 discs, I don't have to throw either of them nearly as hard as I have to throw the Firebird. And that's because the Firebird, while it is only a 9-speed like the Thunderbird, it has a rating of 4 for the fade, which means that it's going to be a very overstable driver. So in order for me to really put it out there, I have to put more snap and effort into it. The reason I say all this is because it's a really easy trap for beginners to fall into, that as they're building up, they want to throw a Firebird disc because all the Innova Pros throw it, or a comparable disc with other brands. And so what you end up trying to do, because you want to throw it, is you really end up taking your wrist and elbow out of it, and you're rotating your shoulders really hard to throw it because you want to get that added oomph behind the disc. You're going to find that after repeated use of that movement, your shoulder is really going to start to hurt, your arm's going to start to hurt, and this is past the traditional, soreness in the forearm with the forehand. We're talking about pain, okay? And so that's why starting with understable discs and learning proper form is going to be super important. So every class of discs that you use, start with something understable, practice those hyzer flips, and then you can get to more overstable discs as your form gets better, gets smoother, and becomes more efficient. One of the most difficult things in disc golf is to throw the forehand flat, or in other words, nose down. It's so easy to throw the forehand nose up. Over the last couple years of playing, one thing that I have realized with the forehand is that your chest and your hips are going to be a great indicator of where the disc is going. Obviously the hips, like we talked about in the first video, wherever your lead foot's toe is pointing, that's where your disc is going to go. When we're coming through on the follow through of the disc, your chest is going to be a great indicator, not of direction, but of nose angle, okay? So when you're throwing the forehand, if you're constantly throwing nose up, you need to sort of stop in your follow through when you're done throwing and ask yourself, where's my chest pointing? Because if my chest is pointing up to the sky, the disc is now nose up. If my chest is flat and it's basically parallel, or I don't exactly know how to describe it, but basically if my chest is flat and square and is not pointed up and is not pointed down, but rather just neutral, we'll say, that means the disc is going to be neutral or flat. The nose angle is going to be flat. And so keeping that chest in direct line and not leaning back and not leaning forward on a straight shot is key. And for beginners especially who are still learning how to throw the forehand, you want to focus on keeping that chest straight. Don't let yourself get in this really bad habit of throwing up, because not actually throwing up, but throwing the disc nose up, because what you're going to then think is that the disc is too overstable. And it's not necessarily because the disc is too overstable. It's just because you're throwing it nose up, which makes the disc more overstable. So it's really important to work on that in your follow through, that your chest is staying flat and not leaning back. The last and final thing that I want to talk to you guys about today is when to release the disc on the forehand. This is a really tricky thing, at least from my personal experience, because, well, it's such a fine area to release. There's such a small window of release timing that's going to keep the disc going where you want it to go. All right, if you release all the way out here, all right, you're going to naturally start throwing on an anhyzer because your body is not in sync. Your elbows popped out completely, and so it's really hard to throw hyzer this way. You're going to throw anhyzer, so the disc is going to come swooping in from the right, and depending on the stability of the disc, it may fade or it may just keep going left. Likewise, you want to really try and throw straight, so what you might do is you might pull it until it's directly in front of your chest. Well, you're going to throw a lot of hyzer like that, or you're going to you'll pull it more, because once again, your body is now crossing itself, and you're trying to continue movement when movement cannot be continued. So your wrist is going to roll, and once again, you'll throw anhyzer, not hyzer. You'll throw anhyzer. So the optimal release point for a forehand, okay, is not directly in front of you, because that'll also mess up with your shoulder. It's not all the way out to the side, because that will give you some weird angles, unless of course you're throwing around a tree. What you want to do is keep it sort of on the outside of your shoulder's natural position. So let me come closer to the camera. The optimal release is right about here. So you see how the disc, this is if it was right in front of me, how it's covering my torso. Right out over here, it's in line with my shoulder, but the body, or the main part of the disc is on the outside of my shoulder. And remember, if I'm flicking it, I'm not hurting myself because my body is all cleanly in line. The disc is just rotating around this axis point of the wrist. And so that's really the optimal release point, is right outside your shoulder. Your arm's not going to be perfectly in front of you, but it's not going to be this really wide angle either. And so that's something that's going to take some practice. If you're really working on this release point, I recommend that you start with a slower disc, learn how to forehand putters and mids, and that will help you, because you then don't have to worry too much about putting power in the disc, because it's a lower speed. You can really focus on hitting this right release point every single time. Alright guys, so those are the 5 finer details to the forehand shot. I hope you found this video super helpful. If you haven't done so already, please make sure that you like it, and make sure that you're subscribed and hit that notification bell. Comment down below which of these 5 tips has helped you the most. I really want to hear what you guys have to say. That's all I have for you today. Until next time, have a great round.